Today is the 8th of September and we are on the last chapter, Sacca Samyutta. I come to Sutta 56.32. It's on page 1858. The Buddha said, "Monks, if anyone should speak thus, without having made the breakthrough to the noble truth of suffering as it really is, without having made the breakthrough to the noble truth of the origin of suffering as it really is, without having made the breakthrough to the noble truth of the cessation of suffering as it really is, without having made the breakthrough to the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering as it really is, I will completely make an end to suffering. This is impossible." Just as monks, if someone should speak thus, having made a basket of acacia leaves, or of pine leaves, or of myrobalan leaves, I will bring water or a palm fruit. This would be impossible. So too, if anyone should speak thus, without having made the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths as they really are, I will make completely an end to suffering. This is impossible. But monks, if anyone should speak thus, having made the breakthrough to the noble truth of suffering as it really is, having made the breakthrough to the noble truth of the origin of suffering as it really is, having made the breakthrough to the noble truth of the cessation of suffering as it really is, having made the breakthrough to the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering as it really is, I will completely make an end to suffering. This is possible. Just as monks, if someone should speak thus, having made a basket of lotus leaves, or of kino leaves, or of maluva leaves, I will bring water or a palm fruit. This would be possible. So too, if anyone should speak thus, having made the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths, I will completely make an end to suffering. This is possible. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. That's the end of the sutta. So in this sutta, it's very clear that there is no liberation from samsara without thoroughly understanding the Four Noble Truths. So the Four Noble Truths are extremely important in the Buddha's teachings. The most important principles in the Buddha Dhamma concerns these Four Noble Truths. It's not like some of the Mahayana books say, and Four Noble Truths are primary school stuff. Now we come to 56.35. Monks, suppose there were a man with a lifespan of 100 years who could live 100 years. Someone would say to him, "Come, good man, in the morning they will strike you with 100 spears. At noon they will strike you with 100 spears. In the evening they will strike you with 100 spears. And you, good man, being struck day after day by 300 spears, will have a lifespan of 100 years, will live 100 years. Then, after 100 years have passed, you will make the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths to which you had not broken through earlier. It is fitting, monks, for a clansman intent on his good to accept the offer. For what reason? Because this samsara is without discoverable beginning. The first point cannot be discerned of blows by spears, blows by swords, blows by axes. And even though this may be so, monks, I do not say that the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths is accompanied by suffering or displeasure. Rather, the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths is accompanied only by happiness and joy. But for the Noble Truth of suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. That's the end of the sutta. So here the Buddha is saying, suppose somebody were to make a bargain with you. Would you like to be struck with 300 spears each day for your whole life of 100 years? But because of being struck by 300 spears each day, at the end of your life, you will understand thoroughly the Four Noble Truths and become liberated from samsara. And the Buddha says, if that is a bargain, you should quickly grab that offer. Because samsara is without beginning and without an end. If we don't make an effort to get out of samsara, there will be no end to being stabbed by spears, by swords, by axes, and all that. So unless we attain at least the first stage of Aryahood, then this King Yama, Yenlo Wong, is still waiting for us in hell, and we have to see him many, many times. So that's why the Buddha says, even if you were to be stabbed by 300 spears every day for 100 years, it's worth it if you can attain the understanding of the Four Noble Truths and get out of samsara. Otherwise, that suffering in samsara is endless. But then the Buddha says, actually, the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths is not accompanied by suffering. If we make the effort, we practice according to the Buddha's teachings and attain the jhanas, then every day we'll be experiencing happiness and joy. So, in which case, it's even a better offer by the Buddha. So, to practice the Noble Eightfold Path and get happiness in addition to getting out of samsara. The next sutta is 56.37. The Buddha said, monks, this is the forerunner and precursor of the rising of the sun, that is, the dawn. So too, monks, for a monk, this is the forerunner and precursor of the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths as they really are, that is, right view. It is to be expected that a monk with right view will understand as it really is. This is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So here the Buddha says that before you can understand the Four Noble Truths, you must have right view. And right view is stated in the Majjhima Nikaya Sutta 43. If you want to attain right view, it says there that there are two conditions. One is the voice of another. Another person must teach you the Dhamma. You don't learn the Dhamma on your own. You cannot understand the Dhamma just by meditating. Somebody else got to teach you the Dhamma. That's the first condition. The second condition is yoniso manasikara. You have proper attention or careful attention. So only two conditions. So that's why I always stress that right view is extremely important. When you come into the Dhamma, the first thing we must attain is right view. In other words, study the early suttas found in the Nikayas. And once you have right view, then you have started to understand the Four Noble Truths and you are on your way out of samsara. The next sutta is 56.39. This is an interesting as well as important sutta. Monks, those ascetics or Brahmins who do not understand as it really is, this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. They look up at the face of another ascetic or Brahmin, thinking, this worthy is surely one who really knows, who really sees. Suppose, monks, a tuft of cotton wool or kapok, light wafted by the wind, has settled on an even piece of ground. An easterly wind would drive it westward. A westerly wind would drive it eastward. A northerly wind would drive it southward. A southerly wind would drive it northward. For what reason? Because of the lightness of the tuft. So too, monks, those ascetics or Brahmins who do not understand as it really is, this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. They look up at the face of another ascetic or Brahmin, thinking, this worthy is surely one who really knows, who really sees. For what reason? Because they have not seen the Four Noble Truths. But monks, those ascetics or Brahmins who understand as it really is, this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. They do not look up at the face of another ascetic or Brahmin, thinking, this worthy is surely one who really knows, who really sees. Suppose, monks, there was an iron pillar or an Indra's pillar with a deep base, deep foundation, securely planted, immobile, unshaking. Even if a forceful blast of wind comes, whether from the east, the west, north or the south, that pillar would not shake, quake or tremble. For what reason? Because the pillar has a deep base and is securely planted. So too monks, those ascetics or Brahmins who understand as it really is, this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. They do not look up at the face of another ascetic or Brahmin, thinking, this worthy is surely one who really knows, who really sees. For what reason? Because monks, they have clearly seen the Four Noble Truths. But four, the Noble Truth of suffering, the Noble Truth of the origin of suffering, the Noble Truth of the cessation of suffering, the Noble Truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. That's the end of the sutta. So this sutta says that some people, when they don't understand the Dhamma, they are always looking for the right teacher. Ho liao su hu, yao liu si fu. So they observe the monk and they think, wow, oh chong yim, oh mindful, all this. They forget that there's one sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya. The Buddha says there are 4 types of containers. There's one container which is open and empty. There's one container which is open and full. There's another container which is closed and empty. There's another container that is closed and full. So it refers to the fact that there are some monks, they look very mindful and very impressive, but sometimes bo liao, mo liu, they don't understand the Dhamma. And sometimes you have one who is looks very impressive, mindful and all that, but he yao liu he knows the Dhamma. On the other hand, you have some monk who is not impressive at all. And sometimes this unimpressive monk does not understand the Dhamma. On the other hand, a monk can be very unimpressive, but he understands the Dhamma. So you look from the outside, you cannot see. So you cannot understand. You cannot know that person's heart, the mind. So looks are very deceiving. So don't look at the face of a monk and think, yao liu or mo liu. So that's why the Buddha says, don't depend on another monk. Depend on yourself and depend on the Buddha's Dhamma. Okay, 56.41. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. There the Blessed One addressed the monks thus, Monks, once in the past, a certain man set out from Rajagaha and went to the Sumagada lotus pond, thinking, I will reflect about the world. He then sat down on the bank of the Sumagada lotus pond, reflecting about the world. Then monks, that man saw a 4-division army entering a lotus stalk on the bank of the pond. Having seen this, he thought, I must be mad, I must be insane. I've seen something that doesn't exist in the world. The man returned to the city and informed a great crowd of people, I must be mad, sirs, I must be insane. I've seen something that doesn't exist in the world. They said to him, how is it, good man, that you are mad? How are you insane? And what have you seen that doesn't exist in the world? And he said, here, sirs, I left Rajagaha and approached the Sumagada lotus pond, thinking I will reflect about the world. I then sat down on the bank of the Sumagada lotus pond, reflecting about the world. Then I saw a 4-division army entering a lotus stalk on the bank of the pond. That's why I'm mad. That's why I'm insane. And that's what I've seen that doesn't exist in the world. And they said, surely you are mad, good man. Surely you are insane. And what you have seen doesn't exist in the world. And the Buddha said, nevertheless, monks, what that man saw was actually real, not unreal. Once in the past, the Devas and the Asuras were arrayed for battle. In that battle, the Devas won, and the Asuras were defeated. In that defeat, the Asuras were frightened and entered the Asura city through the lotus stalk, to the bewilderment of the Devas. Therefore, monks, do not reflect about the world, thinking, the world is eternal, the world is not eternal, the world is finite, the world is infinite. The soul and the body are the same. The soul is one thing, the body is another. Or the Tathagata exists after death, or the Tathagata does not exist after death, or the Tathagata both exists and does not exist after death, or the Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist after death. For what reason? Because, monks, this reflection is unbeneficial, irrelevant to the fundamentals of the holy life, and does not lead to revulsion, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. When you reflect, monks, you should reflect, this is suffering. You should reflect, this is the origin of suffering. You should reflect, this is the cessation of suffering. You should reflect, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. For what reason? Because, monks, this reflection is beneficial, relevant to the fundamentals of the holy life, and leads to revulsion, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand, this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So here the Buddha says, that sometimes we might see what is very rare to see in the world, and we might think that we are mad. And also the Buddha says, don't be like this man, go to a corner and reflect about this world. And you reflect about this world, and then you have all kinds of views about the world. But the Buddha said, if you want to reflect, then you should reflect on the Four Noble Truths, because that is beneficial. If you reflect on other things, it is not beneficial. This reflection can be said to be also contemplation as vipassana. So this vipassana, we should contemplate only on four things. Objects of vipassana are the body, feelings, the mind, and Dhamma. Others are not beneficial if you reflect on other things. The next sutta is quite important. 56.42. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Rajagaha on Mount Vulture Peak. Then the Blessed One addressed the monks thus, "Come, monks, let us go to Patibana Peak for the day's abiding." "Yes, Venerable Sir," those monks replied. Then the Blessed One, together with a number of monks, went to Patibana Peak. A certain monk saw the steep precipice of the Patibana Peak and said to the Blessed One, "That precipice is indeed steep, Venerable Sir. That precipice is extremely frightful. But is there, Venerable Sir, any other precipice steeper and more frightful than that one?" And the Buddha said, "There is, monk." "But what, Venerable Sir, is that precipice deeper and more frightful than that one?" And the Buddha said, "Those ascetics and Brahmins, monk, who do not understand as it really is, this is suffering. Who do not understand as it really is, this is the origin of suffering. Who do not understand as it really is, this is the cessation of suffering. Who do not understand as it really is, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. They delight in volition that leads to birth, in volition that leads to aging, in volition that leads to death, in volition that leads to sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. Delighting in volition, they generate volition that leads to birth, generate volitions that lead to aging, generate volitions that lead to death, generate volitions that lead to sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. Having generated such volitions, they tumble down the precipice of birth, tumble down the precipice of aging, tumble down the precipice of death, tumble down the precipice of sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. They are not freed from birth, aging, and death, not freed from sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. Not free from suffering, I say. But monks, those ascetics and Brahmins who understand as it really is, this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. They do not delight in volitions that lead to birth, nor in volitions that lead to aging, nor in volitions that lead to death, nor in volitions that lead to sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. Not delighting in such volitions, they do not generate volitions that lead to birth, nor generate volitions that lead to aging, nor generate volitions that lead to death, nor generate volitions that lead to sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. Not having generated such volitions, they do not tumble down the precipice of birth, nor tumble down the precipice of aging, nor tumble down the precipice of death, nor tumble down the precipice of sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. They are free from birth, aging, and death, free from sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair, free from suffering, I say. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. That's the end of the sutta. So here, the Buddha brought the monks up the hill, and when they saw this precipice, which is very steep, the monks said, this is extremely dangerous precipice. Because if you fall down this precipice, you will surely die. So it's extremely dangerous. So he asked the Buddha, is there any other precipice more dangerous? The Buddha said, yes. The precipice of samsara. We fall down the precipice of samsara, we don't die only once. We die many, many times, endless times. And even before each time we die, we suffer so much. So every lifetime we come, unless we are born in heaven, every lifetime we come, we suffer. Even as human beings, we suffer. And much worse, if you are reborn as a ghost, or as an animal, or in hell. This precipice of samsara is not something to play with. Don't take it lightly. It's only because we haven't seen how ghosts live that we take life lightly. If you have seen how ghosts live, or if you know about hell, then you won't take things so lightly. The next sutta is 56.45. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Vesali, in the great wood, in the hall with the peaked roof. Then in the morning, the Venerable Ananda dressed, and taking bowl and robe, entered Vesali for alms. The Venerable Ananda saw a number of Lichavi youths practicing archery in the training hall, shooting arrows from a distance through a very small keyhole, head through butt without missing. When he saw this, the thought occurred to him, these Lichavi youths are indeed trained. These Lichavi youths are indeed well trained, in that they shoot arrows from a distance through a very small keyhole, head through butt without missing. Then when the Venerable Ananda had walked for alms in Vesali, and had returned from his alms round, after his meal he approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, sat down to one side, and reported what he had seen. The Blessed One said, what do you think, Ananda? Which is more difficult and challenging, to shoot arrows from a distance through a very small keyhole, head through butt without missing, or to pierce through the arrowhead, or to pierce with the arrowhead the tip of a hair split into 7 strands? And Venerable Ananda said, it is more difficult and challenging, Venerable Sir, to pierce with the arrowhead the tip of a hair split into 7 strands. And the Buddha said, but Ananda, they pierce something even more difficult to pierce, who pierce as it really is. This is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Therefore, Ananda, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So here the Buddha says, it is much more difficult to really understand the Four Noble Truths than to shoot an arrow and split a hair into 7 strands. Why? Because understanding the Four Noble Truths is to understand it at a shallow level is not so difficult, but to understand it thoroughly and become enlightened, that is difficult. Because you have to cultivate your mind until it's so sharp, totally rid of all the defilements, the 5 hindrances, which means attaining at least the 4 jhanas. And then after that, then only you can see the Dhamma so clearly and understand the 4 Noble Truths. Remember that we read in the earlier sutta, even the Sotapanna and the Sakadagamin do not have joyous wisdom and what's the other one? Swift wisdom. So only the Anagamin and the Arahant has joyous wisdom and swift wisdom, meaning deep wisdom, which comes only with the fourth jhana. That's why it's not so easy to totally understand the 4 Noble Truths. There's some people, they just recite Ku Chi Mie Tao and they think they understand the 4 Noble Truths. That's really silly. That's what suffering, origin of suffering, cessation of suffering, and way leading to the cessation of suffering. They just repeat it like a parrot. The next sutta is 56.47. Now this is another famous sutta. Monks, suppose a man would throw a yoke with a single hole into the great ocean, and there was a blind turtle which would come to the surface once every 100 years. What do you think, monks? Would that blind turtle coming to the surface once every 100 years insert its neck into that yoke with a single hole? Stop here for a moment. This yoke is the piece of wood which the buffalo, the bullock, uses. This piece of wood is put around the neck of the bullock, the bull, and this bullock has to pull the cart, because this wood is placed around his neck. So when he moves, he pulls the cart. So this is the yoke. So this yoke, you throw into the ocean. The ocean is so huge, and it's floating on the ocean. And then you have a blind turtle at the bottom of the ocean. Only once in 100 years it comes up. What is the chance of it putting its head through the yoke? It's more difficult than winning the lotto, isn't it? And then a monk answered the Buddha, if it would ever do so, Venerable Sir, it would be only after a very long time. And then the Buddha said, sooner, I say, would that blind turtle coming to the surface once every 100 years insert its neck into that yoke with a single hole, then the fool who has gone once to the nether world would regain the human state. For what reason? Because here, monks, there is no conduct guided by the Dhamma, no righteous conduct, no wholesome activity, no meritorious activity. Here, there prevails mutual devouring, the devouring of the weak. For what reason? Because monks, they have not seen the 4 Noble Truths. What for? The Noble Truth of suffering, the Noble Truth of the cessation, of the origin of suffering, the Noble Truth of the cessation of suffering, the Noble Truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So here, actually what the Buddha means, I think, is that if a person does not understand the Dhamma and does not have right view, he has wrong view, that leads him to rebirth in the animal realm and the hell realm. And these 2 realms, once you go down to the animal realm and the hell realm, you'll be there for a very, very long time. The Buddha says, the one who goes to the woeful plains of rebirth is a fool. Actually, when we have the human body and we don't make use of it and we waste our life, we are really a fool. Then when you lose the human body, then you want to recover the human body, it's very, very hard. That's why you see sometimes some people, they go into a trance and they invite the spirit into their body. The ghost will quickly come and enter their body. Some people think it's a deva or something, but most of the time it's the ghost. Because the ghost is suffering in the ghost realm, and then he remembers, last time when I was a human being, life was so good. So you invite him to your body, quickly he'll come. And some of them also, they come because they realize that they did not do enough merit. That's why they are born in the ghost realm. So they want to have the chance to do merit, and they come into the human body. So this sutta is very striking, giving us a very strong warning that if we if we lead a foolish life, then we will find very difficult to get back this human form. And then the Buddha said, monks, suppose that this great earth had become one mass of water, and a man would throw a yoke with a single hole upon it. An easterly wind would drive it westward, a westerly wind would drive it eastward, a northerly wind would drive it southward, a southerly wind would drive it northward. There was a blind turtle who would come to the surface once every 100 years. What do you think, monks? Would that blind turtle coming to the surface once every 100 years insert its neck into that yoke with a single hole? It would be by chance, Venerable Sir, that blind turtle coming to the surface once every 100 years would insert its neck into that yoke with a single hole. So too, monks, it is by chance that one obtains the human state or the human body. It is by chance that a Tathagata, an Arhan, a perfectly enlightened one, arises in the world. It is by chance that the Dhamma Vinaya proclaimed by the Tathagata shines in the world. You have obtained that human state, monks. Tathagata and Arhan Sammasambuddha has arisen in the world. The Dhamma Vinaya proclaimed by the Tathagata shines in the world. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So here is another warning by the Buddha that it's so difficult to obtain the human body. Now we have it. So difficult for an Arhan, Sammasambuddha, to arise in the world. Now we have it. So difficult for the Dhamma Vinaya to shine in the world. Now also, all the three perfect conditions we have. And if we don't make use of it, we are a real fool, and we have to suffer for being a fool. So, you just imagine, the Buddha came into this world, and now 2,500 years later, the Dhamma is still with us. How long it's going to last, we don't know. It's not going to last very long. Another few more 1,000 years, and it would have disappeared. And yet, this world, how long is this world? This earth, scientists say, is at least 5 billion years old. And 5 billion years old inside there, for a short period, the light of the Dhamma appears in the world, shines in the world, only for a short time. You don't grab the opportunity, then you'll be reborn in the darkness again. The ignorance of the Dhamma is the darkness. So this opportunity that has come to us is so rare, just like the turtle coming up once in 100 years to put its neck through that hole in the yoke. Such a rare opportunity. In a similar way, this rare chance, we have already, the chance has come to us. Whether we make use of it or not is entirely up to us. So the Buddha says, that's the difference between the wise man and the fool. We read in the earlier sutta. The wise man is the one who practices the holy path. The fool is the one who ignores the holy path. 56.51 is another famous sutta. Then the Blessed One took up a little bit of soil in his fingernail and addressed the monks. The Buddha took the soil on his fingernail like that, at the tip of his fingernail, just holding up a bit like that. Monks, what do you think which is more, the little bit of soil that I have taken up in my fingernail, or this great earth? And they said, Venerable Sir, that great earth is more. The little bit of soil that the Blessed One has taken up in his fingernail is trifling. Compared to the great earth, that little bit of soil is not calculable, does not bear comparison, does not amount even to a fraction. And the Buddha said, so too, monks, for a noble disciple, person accomplished in view, that means with right view, who has made the breakthrough, the suffering that has been destroyed and eliminated is more, while that which remains is trifling. Compared to the former mass of suffering that has been destroyed and eliminated, the latter is not calculable, does not bear comparison, does not amount even to a fraction, as there is a maximum of 7 more lives. He is one who understands as it really is. This is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So this sutta is telling us that if we attain right view, we have made the breakthrough. And once you attain right view, the suffering that you have left in existence is so little compared to the former suffering that you put behind you. Or you can say the suffering that you have left after attaining right view is so little compared to your friend who has not attained right view. The guy who has not attained right view, he will turn in samsara for countless lifetimes some more. So the Buddha says also, once you have right view, there is a maximum of 7 more lifetimes for you. Here is very clear, maximum of 7 more lifetimes. You will only be reborn 7 more lifetimes, maximum. That is, even if you don't make any effort, 7 more. If you make some effort, you'll be shorter still. But once you have become Arya with right view, as I mentioned, you can take a slow boat out of samsara because you'll have a good life. You'll either be reborn in heaven or as a human being. And each time you come back as a human or a heavenly being, you have these 4 things. The other day, Ayuvano Sukhang Balang, long life, beauty, happiness, and power or strength. Therefore, the Buddha always says we should exert ourselves to understand the 4 noble truths. And basically, to understand the 4 noble truths is to study suttas like this in the Samyutta Nikaya. In fact, out of all the 5 Nikayas, to me, this is the most important Nikaya. All the important teachings are inside here. I think that's the end of the suttas that I want to read in this last chapter. So we have come to the end of the Samyutta Nikaya. It took us about 2 months. I think it was very good. All the important suttas in this Samyutta Nikaya, I believe we have gone through. Those that we did not go through are not so important. Sometimes there were repetitions, or the meaning was not so important. So I'll just recap the 5 books that we went through in the Samyutta Nikaya. We look at page 7 in the beginning, the general contents. The first book is the Sagata Vaga. Sagata means Sa is with, Gata is verses. So it is suttas accompanied by verses. So the first book, you find all the suttas. At the end of the suttas, you had verses. And this first book, there were 11 chapters. And out of these 11 chapters, the important ones would be like Kosala Samyutta, concerning the Pasanadi king. Some good Dhamma was there. And then the Brahma Samyutta, this concerning the Brahma Devas. We found that some of the Brahma Devas had an affinity with the Buddha from the past life. The Buddha went to them mostly because some of them were his former teachers, and out of gratitude he went to teach them. Then the Brahmana Sutta was quite interesting. Those Brahmins who argued with the Buddha, and when they were converted by the Buddha, some of them so quickly renounced and became monks. And then Sacca Samyutta also was quite interesting. Sacca Devaraja was an interesting Deva with a lot of good qualities. Then the second book, Nidana Vaga. Nidana means causation. That means dependent origination. This is a very important topic. We went through this 12th chapter. We went through in quite detail. Let me see. I remember it took many days to go through it. 6 days, we spent 6 nights on this Nidana Samyutta, one of the longest times we spent. So this Nidana Samyutta was very important. And then inside the second book, the Labha Sakara Samyutta was also very important for monks, on the dangers of gains and honors, fame, offerings and fame, how it can corrupt a monk. And then the Upama Samyutta, number 20, that was very important. Some very good similes were given in this chapter. And the third book was the Kanda Vaga we went through. Kanda is the aggregates. So this is a chapter on the 5 aggregates of attachment. This is also an extremely important topic. If you want to understand non-self, it's very important to understand the 5 aggregates as not self or non-self. This chapter 22, we also spent quite a number of days. We also spent about 6 days, 6 nights discussing this chapter 22, Kanda Samyutta. And then the other chapters in this book are not so important. This is an outstanding chapter in this third book. I remember we mentioned that it took a huge part of the book. And the fourth book we went through was Salayatana Vaga. Salayatana means the 6 sense bases. This is another very important topic. In fact, these 3 are the main topics that we should understand if we want to see not self, no self. It's the dependent origination, the 5 aggregates, and the 6 sense bases. So this chapter 35, we spent also many days. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We spent 7 days. We spent 7 days discussing this Salayatana Samyutta. And then the Vedana Samyutta also, feelings also quite important. And then Chitta Samyutta was interesting. Chapter 41 was interesting. And then chapter 42 also had a number of very good suttas on the headman, Penghulu, village headman. And then we came to the last book, Mahavaga, the great book because it's probably the biggest book. And some of the chapters here were quite important. Magga, the path, Noble Eightfold Path, the first chapter. And Bojjhanga was quite important. In fact, we spent quite a number of days on Bojjhanga. We spent, we spent 5 days. We spent 5 days, on this Bojjhanga Samyutta, factors of enlightenment. That's a very important topic. The other important topic in this book, this last book, was the Satipatthana. Satipatthana, we spent 3 days on the Satipatthana. And then this Satipatthana, the suttas here, if you study the suttas in this Satipatthana Samyutta, you will understand Satipatthana much better than if you study the Satipatthana Sutta itself. Satipatthana Sutta just tells you the objects of meditation, but the meaning of Satipatthana, how to practice Satipatthana is all found in this Satipatthana Samyutta. And the Indriya Samyutta was another important chapter. And then the Anapanasati Samyutta 54 and the Sotapatti Samyutta on stream entry. All these were important. I hope later you will, after our 2 ladies here are doing a lot of good work, editing our talks, so later we will make into MP3s, maybe probably two MP3s, and then we'll make it for free distribution. So you can get a copy and then you slowly listen to them again and again. You have to listen many times. And then slowly all the pieces fall into place. Because all these suttas are connected. They're connected. So you have to see it from different suttas, explain it from different angles. And if you can listen to the Dhamma talk together with your book, you refer to your book. Anytime you can pause and look at the book. You'll understand better. If there's anything later, if you want to clarify, you can always contact me again. So we stop here for tonight, and then we can have some discussion. If we look into the suttas and the Vinaya, we find that the Buddha was very tolerant. And sometimes when certain monks, there were a few monks that what we call in Chinese white tan, rotten eggs. Rotten eggs. And yet the Buddha was quite tolerant of them. And sometimes they step out of line, the Buddha will make a new precept. And they step out of line again, the Buddha makes another new precept. And also we find that in other suttas and also in the Vinaya, sometimes the Buddha says that when a person misbehaves, if we cannot teach him, sometimes we have compassion on him, hope that he will change himself. If people listen to the Dhamma, it has some effect. For some people, the effect to change is faster. For some people, it's slower. But usually, the Dhamma has some effect, very good effect on us. When we live together, sometimes we have to learn to be tolerant. And sometimes we don't look at other people's faults so much. The spiritual path, we learn to look at our faults. And we only do something when the behavior is out of line so much that it adversely affects others. It hinders other people's practice. Then we cannot tolerate. If it is their personal defects, personal shortcomings, we try to ignore, because every person we have good points and bad points, and especially like in a monastery like this. In fact, for most monasteries are short of people. You can ask Bing Chao. Bing Chao has been around a few centers. He says they are always short of people. Because of that, we should be more tolerant. In the Buddha's Vinaya, there is no fixed number of times. There's no fixed number of times, and it's only up to the preceptor whether the preceptor wants to accept him or not. If he can find a preceptor who's willing to accept him, then it's okay. But in Mahayana teachings, they have a limit, 7 times or something like that, and that is from the external sect. In India, because we see in our Vinaya books, the Buddha mentioned that in the external sects, they have this figure of 7. For example, external sect ascetics, when they go on alms round, they go 7 houses. They're not supposed to go more than 7 houses. But this is not the Buddhist practice. The Buddha allowed monks to go as many times as they wanted, as they needed.
So if you venerate the preceptor, it takes precedence over the parents, is it?
Takes what? Takes...
if you treat his preceptor as his parent, because he goes forth, so he is behind his lay parents, so he takes greater respect to the preceptor, and I find that in Thai, actually, they treat the preceptor like their father. They don't watch the TV, touch the teacher. They really treat the preceptor as a father.
Yes, according to the Vinaya, in the Vinaya books, we have a list of duties of the student towards his teacher, either his teacher or his preceptor. And that list of duties is very, very complete. From the beginning of the day, when the preceptor or the acharya, the teacher, wakes up, the disciple is supposed to get the toothbrush for him, provide the water for him, and then if he wants to take a bath, to prepare the bathroom, if he wants hot water, to prepare hot water, And if he wants a drink, to prepare a drink. And if he wants to wear the robe, go and get the robe for him. And all this. And then when he goes or if he wants to go out for alms round, the disciple has to get his robe for him and then carry his bowl for him together with his own bowl. Then when they have reached the town, then the disciple gives the bowl to the teacher. Then after alms round, the disciple will carry his own bowl and the teacher's bowl again. And then he's supposed to rush back to the monastery and then put down the bowl and get the water ready to wash the feet for the teacher when the teacher comes back. And then when the teacher comes back, to take off his robe and go and dry it on the string and do everything to serve the teacher. That is the tradition. The thing is, some monks, they take the trouble to teach their disciple all this. But some monks are so busy that they don't have time to teach so many things. But sometimes if the disciple, he takes a trouble to study the Vinaya books or the suttas, he should know. But at least, even if it is not so detailed in serving the teacher, he should have the respect. Because in the Vinaya books, it is stated that if the disciple does not have enough love and respect for the teacher, he should be asked to leave. If he does not carry the bowl of the teacher when he goes on alms round, also he's supposed to leave. And all these things. So the Buddha was very strict about all these things. In a way it's good because nowadays a lot of monks, they do not have enough respect for the teacher. They think, I wear the robe, I'm also a monk, you also a monk, I am a member of the Sangha, I have equal rights. Some people are like that. So sometimes the teacher cannot do much, just has to look at the disciple and see the attitude. Attitude is very important. Some people, the attitude is no good, you try to teach them, they won't learn. Then as I mentioned before, any monk wearing the robe, he should realize karma vipaka, how you treat your teacher and senior monks. Next time, in a few years' time, this karma vipaka will come back to you. You get the same treatment.
So we have this kind of people don't teach us to respect teachers and parents, so the people actually go in the past or the tradition, they don't go through, they look after the people like the parents would be. So I find that in our tradition, monks or those aspiring to be monks, we should know this even before they ordain.
But then, this is the modern world, so you cannot expect too much in the olden days. Also, it depends on the culture, you see. Like in Thailand, children have been brought up from very young to bow to their parents, to bow to their teachers, to bow to monks. Like last time when I lived in Thailand, we go to the village on alms round, And then these villagers, they see us coming from the distance, they quickly tell their children, Prak ma liao, Prak ma liao. They tell the children, the Prak is monk ma liao, lei jo Then ask them to come, and why Prak, pay respect And these children are very small, very small children. They encouraged to go and tak bat to offer food So that's why I keep my bowl strap. You notice my bowl strap is very long because you have to bend down to the small girl offer you food. You have to bend very low, so you have a long strap, easier to bend. So it's a tradition. Years ago in China, we had that kind of tradition. Now we come to Malaysia, after so many years, we become westernized already. The Western attitude, ego is very strong. Individual first. So it's times have changed, so we have to recognize that. You cannot expect what happened 2,500 years ago to practice it now. It's very difficult. Reading the original discourses of the Buddha is the first step. And you should try to spend much time studying the suttas again and again. You finish the book, you read it again. You finish the book, you read it again. And as you study the suttas, as you understand the Buddha's teachings, you will slowly put them into practice. You will only practice what you understand. So it's difficult to tell you, you practice this, you practice that. But basically, initially, the precepts are important. Not initially, all the time, precepts are important. So the foundation is always the precepts and right view. Right view means understanding of the original discourses of the Buddha. And then when you have time, you meditate. And I always encourage people to meditate early in the morning. The first thing you do when you get up. If you have more time when you get up, you do some reading of the suttas. Because when we get up in the morning, we are a bit groggy, a bit sleepy. So when you read the suttas, you become you more awake. Then after that you meditate a bit. Like for people like you, retired, you have more time. So you should spend as much time as you can studying the suttas and meditating. These are the two cornerstones of the spiritual path. Studying the original suttas and meditating as much as you can. And then in between that, you have to do your worldly duties. Then even when you do your worldly duties, then if you understand the Dhamma, then you always keep the Dhamma in mind, you see. Whatever you do, you're guided by the Dhamma. And you always think of the Dhamma. So the Buddha says, if you constantly think of the Dhamma, you have lofty thoughts, high thoughts. You don't think of base things. So that would bring you to a good rebirth. The most important thing, now that we have come to the original teachings of the Buddha, is to make as much effort to study the suttas or listen to the teachings that have been recorded, so that you get right view. Once you get right view, you have got the most valuable thing in life that you can get. There's nothing more valuable in life you can get than right view. Then the suttas, the Buddha said, even if somebody were to make a bargain with you, that you be stabbed 300 times every day for 100 years, it's worth to take up that offer, special offer. So then the Buddha says, but then to get right view, you don't have to suffer so much actually. You just need the sincerity. In this spiritual path, the sincerity, that earnestness is very important. If you are sincere, then you will make the effort. If you are not sincere, half-hearted efforts not worthwhile. Doesn't work out. So if you are sincere on the spiritual path, you will make enough effort to reap the benefit. Yeah, tomorrow I can. Any other thing?
I think it's not the way that human life is very precious and it's very difficult to get human to be born as human. We read in the Sutta also that Deva's lifespan is up. Some other Devas admonish Deva to take human rebirth, so that they should be born again in the Deva world and nature. So one thing I would like to know, whether a Deva can bring themselves to be born as a human?
I think the Devas are having psychic power. There are certain things that they know. They probably know that their karma is good enough after enjoying their Deva or Devi lifespan, that they will be reborn in the human realm. And it appears like some of them can even choose the rebirth, where they want to be reborn into which family. But I guess not for all of them. Those with very good karma. But some devas, like it was mentioned in one of the suttas, like this, what's his name, Sambara or something, he used to play around with his mantra, I think. And after he died, he was reborn in hell. So that's why, that's one sutta, if you remember, Sacca Deva Raja wanted to learn that mantra. And then Vipachiti told him to wait and he'll consult the other asuras. And after a few days, he told Sacca Deva Raja, I said, I think you better don't learn that mantra. This Sambara, after fooling around with that mantra, now is in hell. So nowadays a lot of people, they like to use mantras. It's very dangerous. Mantras are words of power. I always say in Hokkien, 做降頭還是用照，加降頭還是用照。做降頭又係用咒，改降頭又係用咒。Understand? You understand the meaning of 咒? Mantras apparently came from the Devas, and it was learned by the Brahmins. The early Brahmins, they were ascetics, and they cultivated until they had psychic power, so they could communicate with the Devas, and probably from there they learned the mantras. And because the mantras were very powerful, they kept it a secret. They refused to divulge it to other castes. But slowly, because of monetary gains, they slowly it came out, and so other people also practice it. But it's very dangerous. This world, nothing is free. Make use of certain powers, later you have to pay for it. Mantras are not the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha mentioned in one of our suttas that many lifetimes ago, he learned mantras and he taught mantras. And now in this last lifetime, he teaches the way of wisdom. He doesn't teach the way of mantras. It's not so bad, but then some people, maybe their blessings or their merit is not so great. When they chant mantras, some of them, they get sick. I've come across some people, they tell me, so they stop.
Many teachers who become monks in Buddhism, with Brahmin background, they are the ones who adulterate the teaching.
That is possible, but there is only one way. Another way could be because all around you have these Hindu gods and all that, and teachings, so it has some influence. Slowly creeps into Buddhism. Like some of the Hindu gods were brought into Buddhism. For example, Kuan Yin was this Avalokiteswara. Avalokiteswara, the last word is Iswara. This Iswara means God. In Pali is Isara. So Kuan Yin was an Indian god. You go to a Hindu temple, you see this goddess with 16 hands. So probably something like that. So when they brought it into Buddhism, it was a male god. So the earliest statues of Kuan Yin in China was a male Kuan Yin. And then they gave him a sex change operation and then became female. So now we have beautiful Kuan Yins. Like this Amitabha Buddha was, according to these Mahayana books that we have seen, was a Persian sun god, Po Se Tai Yang Sen. So because the sun always sets in the west, so they say Amitabha resides in the west. That's why Amitabha, the characteristic has Wu Liang Guang, Wu Liang Shou, limitless light and limitless life. That's a characteristic of the sun. The Buddha mentioned in the Vinaya books that first the Buddha did not want to start the nun, the bhikkhuni order, and then he was persuaded by Venerable Ananda, and then also because of his foster mother pleading with him to become a nun, so he started. But after that the Buddha said because the nuns order started, that the true Dhamma will last for 500 years. He said, if not, it was supposed to last for 1,000 years. And now it will only last for 500 years. And the reason the Buddha gave was that just like a family, if the family, the house is all men, and then if robbers come, they can fight better with the robbers. But if they have women folk in the house, they have to fight with the robbers, but at the same time they have to worry about their women folk. So also like if a group of caravans, they were traveling over the mountains and were attacked by bandits, if they are all men, it would be easier to defend themselves. If they have women inside the caravan, they have to fight and worry about the women at the same time. So in the same way, once you have nuns, then the monks, in a way, have to look after the nuns. Because the nuns cannot live alone. When the nuns live alone, it was the experience that many of them were assaulted and raped and all that. So the Buddha stopped them from going to the forest alone and all that. They are not like monks. Monks can easily go alone into the forest with less worries. So the nuns have to depend on the monks. So the monks, they want to do their practice, they have to teach the nuns again. And they have to worry about the nuns and all this. So the practice is not so good. That's one reason. Also, another reason is that why the true Dhamma deteriorate. Buddha said that inside the Sangha itself, foolish men arise. And these foolish men, they adulterate the Dhamma by writing new books. So the Buddha warned in the Upama Samyutta, I think 20.7, that later that monks will not want to listen to the original Buddha's suttas. Instead, they want to listen to the words of disciples. That means later writings, like the Mahayana Sutras, the Abhidhamma, the commentaries, the Visuddhimagga, Jataka stories, all this. These Jataka stories are so childish, and yet people think, some people accept them to be true. How can animals talk? It's because of the Jataka stories that they create this concept of parami, that the Buddha cultivated paramis over a long period of time. But this word parami was never mentioned by the Buddha in the original discourses. Buddha doesn't even know the word parami, and the Buddha also never heard of the word parami. And you look into the stories about the paramis, how the Buddha cultivated the paramis, some of them contradict the Dhamma. For example, the Vesantara Jataka, the story of how the Buddha, to perfect his giving parami, he gave away his wife and 2 children to a heartless beggar whom he knew was going to beat them. And then in spite of knowing that this heartless beggar is going to torture his children and his wife, he gave away the wife and children. This contradicts the Dhamma. The Buddha says a wise person's charity should not harm yourself, should not harm others. Right? So when he gives away his wife to this beggar, he harms them, and he harms himself. Other things like in the Jatakas, I mentioned that a long time ago our Bodhisattva was born as a rabbit, and then he saw this hunter hunting the whole day in the forest, could not shoot any animal. So at night the hunter was boiling the water, and he was very hungry and nothing to eat. And this Bodhisattva, this rabbit, in order to perfect his dana, his charity, parami, he jumped into the boiling water, committed suicide for the hunter to eat. This is a very silly story. And then also like this story of the Bodhisattva, a long time ago, he was born as a human being. One day in the forest, from the top of the hill, he saw this tigress was hungry. So because the tigress was so hungry, it had no milk to give its cubs. So if the cubs would die. So this Bodhisattva, he jumped from the top of the hills, committed suicide to feed the tigress. This type of story, people are impressed, but it's really silly stories if you really think about it. And it contradicts the Dhamma, the Buddha says, that a good man's or a wise man's charity must not harm himself or harm others. So okay, we'll stop here for tonight.